Okay, our guest of honor, Yoani Sanchez. People are chanting freedom, 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 freedom. Okay, let's listen to Yoani because we've come here to listen to her. Thank you to everyone who's here. It's a very distinguished audience. We are in a very historic building, Yoani. This was not only the building that processed so many Cubans as refugees, as political refugees in the 60s, but it was also the newsroom of the Miami News and of this historic event that we have here with so much public and so much pain, with so many years of diaspora and exile. So we want to start by simply celebrating that you are here, a blogger, and an independent journalist who is so distinguished, who always tells the truth to the people in power. So that's why, whether you had some words that you want to say, let's listen to Yoani, right? Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much to all, to everyone. Thanks to those who have organized the event. Thanks to those who never lost their hope, who put pressure so that the world would open for me and for so many others. Thanks to organizers, to the people from Miami-Dade College, and also for those who work and who have made possible this beautiful building, the Tower of Freedom. Those who are known to me, my relatives, that after 2 years of separation, I have re-encountered in this country. So today, even though I don't usually read, I have brought a short text that I want to share with you. A short text that will tell you basically about you and us. It's short about us. So I'm going to read my text. It is entitled precisely Cubanos and Period. It is a text that starts with a personal anecdote. And there it goes. A few years ago, when I left Cuba for the first time, I was in a train that left the city of Berlin towards the north. It was an already reunified Berlin, but there still retained fragments of that ugly scar that was that wall that divided a nation. Well, in the compartment of that train, and while was remember my railroad workers, father and grandfather, who would have given anything to be able to travel in that marvel of wagons and locomotives. In that compartment, I started to talk with a young man that was sitting right in front of me. After the first exchange of greetings, a smattering of German with a Guten Tag, to make clear that ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch, the man asked me immediately where I came from. So I told him, ich spreche it's coming out Cuba. Since always happened after you come from the largest island in the Caribbean, the person tried to show how much he knew about our country. Usually, during that trip, I would find people who tell me, "Oh, Cuba, yes, Varadero, rum, salsa music." Also, I found a couple of cases in which the only reference that they had about Cuba was the Buena Vista Social Club, that precisely during that time was at the top of the music chart. But that young man in the Berlin train surprised me. As against other people, he did not answer with a touristic stereotype. He went further. His question was are you from Cuba, Fidel's Cuba, or Miami's Cuba? I blushed. I forgot the little German I knew, and I answered with my best Spanish from Central Havana. Chico, G. I am a Cuban. I am Cuban, a Cuban of Jose Marti. I am a Jose Marti Cuban. Jose Marti Cuban. I am a Jose Marti Cuban. And that's where our brief conversation ended. However, for the remainder of that trip and the rest of my life, I've kept in mind very much that conversation. I have asked myself many times what caused that Berliner and so many other people in the world to view people, Cubans from inside and outside the island, as two separate worlds, two irreconcilable words. That's part also of my work in my Generation Y blog. How could they divide our nation? How can one government, one party, one man in power took over the right to decide who could be a Cuban and who could not? The answer to those questions, you know them better than I do. You who have lived through the pain of exile, who left with only what you had on. You who bid farewell to family members, many of whom you never were able to see again. You who have tried to preserve Cuban, one, indivisible and whole in your minds and your hearts. But I continue to ask myself, what happened? How was it that the name Cuban became something that could only be granted based on ideological basis? Believe me that when you have been born and grown with only one version of history, a mutilated and convenient version of history, you cannot answer that question for yourself. Fortunately, it is always possible to wake up from indoctrination. It suffices to have one question, like a corrosive acid, to get into your head. It suffices that we don't settle for what we were told. Indoctrination is incompatible with doubts. Brainwashing ends precisely when that same brain starts to question those sentences that it had been told. The process of awakening is slow. It starts with estrangement, as if all of a sudden you start seeing the seams of reality. That's how it happened in my case. I was a run-of-the-mill little pioneer. You all know that. I would repeat every morning in school that slogan of "Pioneers for Communism" will be like Che Guevara. I ran numberless times with an anti-gas mask to a shelter while my teachers told me that we were being attacked. I believed them. A child always believes what his elders tell him. But there are some things that did not fit. Every process of search has its trigger event. Precisely when the pieces don't fit, something doesn't make sense, and that absence of logic was outside of school, in my neighborhood and my home. I could not understand why those who had left on the Mariel boat lift were enemies of the homeland. Why my girlfriend were so happy when some of those exiled relatives would send them some food or clothing. Why those neighbors? Thank you. Why those neighbors that have left and were rejected with an act of repudiation in the Cayo Hueso neighborhood where I was being born? Why were those who maintained, who supported their elderly mother, who additionally will give away part of that package to those same people who had thrown eggs and insults to her children? I could not understand. And from that lack of understanding, painful like with every birth, the person that I am now was born. That is why when that Berliner, who had never been in Cuba, attempted to divide my nation, I just faced him off. That is why I'm here before you today, trying to help to prevent anyone ever again to be able to divide one type of Cuban from another. We are going to need you for the future Cuba, and we need you for the present Cuba. Without you, our country would be incomplete. So as someone who has had his extremities amputated, we cannot allow them to continue to divide them. It's just as we continue to be able to live in a country where the freedom of expression, of association, and so many other rights that have been taken away from us, we have to do everything, the possible and impossible, for you to recover those rights that have also been taken away from you. There is no you and us. There is only one us. Let's not allow them to continue separating us. I'm here today because I did not believe the story they told me. Like so many other Cubans who grew up under a single official truth, I have waken up. We have to rebuild our nation. We cannot do it by ourselves. Those who are here, and you know it very well, you have helped many families on the island to put food on the table of your children. You have started off in society where you have to start it from scratch. You have kept and taken Cuba in your hearts. Help us unify to bring down that wall that's against that wall. That Berlin Wall is not made of concrete and bricks, but rather of lies, silence, and bad intentions. In that Cuba, of which many of us dream, it won't be necessary to make clear which type of Cuban one is. Will be just Cubans and period. Cubans. very beautiful, Yoani. And you have answered practically half the questions I had. Have you come to listen to Yoani because you can go out on the street and scream? So when was it that special moment based on what you said, that aha moment? This is not what I was told. Was it something specifically that started to grow in you? That, it doesn't fit. What I've been told, it doesn't fit. I think it was an accumulation of moments. The spatial period, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, for example, that caused a lot of problems for my family. I see the conversion in my father, in my parents. They started to stop believing, to agree, and they started to be very critical persons against the system. That affected me as a teenager. But I remember that when the straw broke the camel's back, for my dissatisfaction, one day that I woke up in the morning, it was August the 13th, that that's Fidel Castro's birthday. And I was on bed, and I stretched my hand to turn on the radio, and then there was a man saying, "Today is the birthday of the fatherland," and I said, "I cannot take it anymore." That was the day. You have talked a lot about computers and how you do your work. But before that, I wanted to go further on. You have already talked about your youth. How did you meet your husband, Reynaldo Escobar? How did that became a marriage? Because he's much older. Nobody is responsible for their age. You can tell me. And also a bit about Theo, what you think about your son and the future of Cuba. Okay, Reynaldo Escobar, my husband. I would love him to be here with me, sharing this special moment in my life. I'll tell him about it. Reynaldo was one of those elements that helped me become the person I am. A journalist driven by her profession, when in the late 80s I realized that there could be more realistic, more objective journalism closer to reality. And after he became an independent journalist, an elevator repairman, and especially a free person that has taught me how to say whatever one thinks and pay the concentration for it. He has been a fundamental support for me and my family, and especially one of the first times I saw him, he told me a phrase that became a premise in my life. Everything that I have said and all the problems I have run into, all the problems I have found in my life took place because I said what I thought. And that phrase that in Cuba, that so much silence, so much in the mask, every word that you say, you have to measure like a single ounce on a balance. That made an impact on me. So I live with the person who makes me freest. No, the gossip. Well, Mario Vargas Llosa. Let me tell you, I needed to read a book by Mario Vargas Llosa, who is an extremely forbidden author in Cuba. No publishing house in Cuba will publish, or any library will include his books. So that magnificent book was the War of the End of the World. So that book sealed a relationship that goes on now for 20 years. Thank you, Vargas Llosa. And you met him through a mutual friend. Let me continue with the gossip. I can see. Yes, it was through a friend. We went through very difficult times. We We met during the special period. We have a son, Theo, who is 18 years old. What is Theo going to do? Theo is, and I share an anecdote that precisely a person who is here that love him, Adolfo Fernandez Saiz, a prisoner from the Black Spring. It was a child that during the Black Spring, when Adolfo went to prison, my husband Adolfo to have to tell Theo, your uncle Adolfo is in jail. Adolfo was very close to the family, so he was considered an uncle. So, and Theo, with that ease that he has for question, and he asked why. So Reynaldo attempted to give him an explanation that wasn't so sad, that wasn't so painful. And he says, well, because Adolfo is a very courageous man, and Theo, who was 8 years old at the time, he answered, so you are a bit of a coward because you continue to be free. And that's my son. So, as you said, you were in Europe. You left the country in 2002. And you were in Switzerland. What led you there? And why did you come back to Cuba? It was known that you had to come back because of some family problems, but it must have been very difficult to make that decision. I left asphyxiated. I was asphyxiated because of lack of expression, because of lack of material things. I had come to the conclusion, I've met so many other Cubans, that I could not have fruits in the country where I had my roots. So I left with $5 in my pocket to start in Zurich. Fortunately, at that time I was working as a Spanish professor, a Spanish teacher for foreigners illegally. That's why I speak this strange Spanish. Well, that's why I was able to buy the ticket, and I had a wonderful experience. It changed my life. As you know, after you emigrate, you're never the same person again. There is always a component of the other nationality, of the other place that remains with you. Punctuality remains with you, to promise things to myself and achieve them. So I'm a bit of a Swiss. So it was a madness. All my friends told me, you are crazy. How could you have abandoned the land of chocolate, my daughter? And I said, Mom, I came back. So I was led to that decision by several reasons. My father got sick. I could not reunite my family again. But I remember at that moment I realized that I would sit in front of a dish of food, and you realize what I'm talking. I would sit in front of a dish of food, and I said, oh, my family, that's not enough food. I would go buy a pair of shoes, and I would calculate and think, how much of this money, with this money to buy shoes, how could they use it in Cuba? And I would stay days in the internet to find news about Cuba. So I realized, Yoani, you are not living in Switzerland, you're living in Cuba. So I made my bags and left. I don't regret it, but it was madness. And your son was with you. He was with me. I asked him. He supported me. He was young, but he supported me. He has never complained about it. And I made a decision. I will not go back to what I was, to who silences, who keeps her opinions to herself, to wear the mask. If I go back, I'll continue to be the person I am now, and I think I've met that. So I'll use a few questions from the readers that they sent by Twitter and also through the internet. It says Yoani recognizes herself as an independent journalist, as free, but she has become a lot larger than that. isn't it important that she will create a party, a political movement, in order to have a new Cuba? Well, why I am is a citizen. I am a self-employed citizen. In Cuba they don't give you a work permit as a citizen. But what happened? The Cuban where I'm from, not even politicians or the presidents will be the most important ones. It will be the citizens. We will be a nation based on the word. A nation based on the word, on arguments, on information, on discussion, on controversy, on public debate. So I have uh, uh, a big responsibility in that sense. The very important politics is done with work. I have the dream, as you know, to devote the rest of my life to journalism, to establish the press media, and also to be able to teach journalism to other people, maybe at a university, in a classroom. And I think that will be very important for the present and future of Cuba, because we cannot allow the nation to be in weapons or to sole leaders. So that's why it's important to have important people define opinion and press, because otherwise we run the risk of to sign again a blank check to the next adventurer that may come up. And another question we just got. Mario Molin says, Yoani, I sympathize with you and wish you luck. I also want to think whether the economic benefit of taking out the embargo will help the common people, because let me tell you that here in American democracies, that to make sure that the big profits of government or big business will get to the common people. What's your reasonings? As I said, and going back to my husband's answer, all the problems I've had in my life is because of saying what I think. So I also want to say that I go out in the world and not only ask me this test what Cuba I'm from, but everybody from every nationality, instead of asking about nationality, the first thing they ask about embargo. It's like a test for Cubans. And I say there are many more important things. That's partly because the Cuban government has exaggerated this topic to deviate attention from the more important things. Well, as you can see, what he asked was something that was really that he respects you. What he's trying to understand. I know the good intention of the question. So having clarified that point, and another important point is that in Cuba, of all the activists that they are trying to have a more democratic Cuba, among those activists there are all kinds of positions about the embargo. Some are in favor of taking it out, others that are against it, but that's not an element for this union. We can live together perfectly well with that. And a perfect example is Berta Soler, the leader of the Ladies in White. Who has a position different from mine, but we work together without any type of problem with it. My position on that point, you know it. I was born in a place where everything is justified with the embargo. Everything, the lack of freedom on the street, the absence of potatoes on your kitchen, the absence of tomatoes in the market. So I am very critical. Since I was small, I was led to believe that everything was because of the embargo. I don't think if it's taken out tomorrow, nothing will change much for the common people. We are a country that lives off subsidies, of the economic support from Venezuela. I don't think it will change anything. It will be a change more symbolic than real. But the embargo, without the embargo, they'll be able to get loans and pay for things, which is what happened with Canada and Spain. That's the danger. That's the danger. But I already live under a government that has an embargo and spends everything in repressing and spends everything in control. I told you that I was gonna get into trouble. But the good thing is that we're going to talk about other things. But I wanted to ask you another question that came on the internet. A gentleman called Arturo Aballín. He says that you already explained how you are paying for this trip to 3 continents. But I want the many people who admire you to have this topic clear so it's transparent. They will always ask me about it because the Cuban government has an approach avoidance problem with money, with prosperity. In having a material basis is very uncomfortable for the Cuban government. That's not about the person who asked me, but only a short introduction. The Cuban government is used to dealing with citizens that are not empowered, that are not informed about their rights. So it is convenient for that citizens to be surviving all the time, not to be able to think beyond the food he's going to buy. And how many convertible pesos he can have. When a citizen goes beyond that cycle because it is a citizen that it has talent or because it has solidarity from other people, so that starts to bother the government. And then they start questioning the integrity and moral ethics of the person. So that shows their double morality because you don't have to live in Cuba because of their mismanagement and the obscene use of the attributes of power with which the people in power live in Cuba. But the trip, well, I'll tell you in detail now that we have time. There is no coffee to give, but water and sugar is fine. Let me tell you, when I went to Brazil, a week before going to Brazil, it was always postponed. A group of Brazilian clubbers set up a group, and at that website, that's where they put together the money for my ticket and my stay. It was a very beautiful state. I had a couple of beautiful days in Rio de Janeiro, in which the hotel association because to compensate for what had happened at the airport, the fanatics that had insulted, they gave me a gift of a couple of nights in the hotel with a very pretty view. And then I went to a movie festival in the Czech Republic in Prague. They covered all my expenses there. And then I went to Mexico. Well, the Ibero-American University had invited me. As you know, all these academic institutions, when they invite a person to give lectures, the minimum they do is to make sure you have shelter and transportation. And the same thing in New York and Washington. The academics, where I gave conference, all that. And many friends, I have received an incredible solidarity. I've never lacked a plate of food. In fact, I have rejected food because it's just been too much. There is a person who knows that when I got to Brazil, a Cuban there, who was there among the public in a boycotting presentation. He gave me an iPad 3. Cubans are like that. Cubans are like that. So I got here also thanks to the solidarity and the constant savings of my sister, who is an exile here in Florida. She's been here for 2 years, Julia. And then I left to Peru a girlfriend who works with silver, with very beautiful earrings, and her family is going to help me too, a group of readers, and then I leave to Europe with academies to the Free University of Berlin. I can assure you there is not a single cent from from the government, from a party, from any ideologically defined group. Thank you. The Cuban government says that I'm a millionaire. Yes, I'm millionaire in friends. Okay, I'll go back to what I'm interested in. Did you dance? I dance very bad. God could not give me everything. Because if you dance the way you write, well, tell me. Uh, we have a favorite band or music group. You were at Chirino's home last night. I don't dance very well, but I like to dance. I like very much the current music. Los Aldeanos, Escuadrón Patriota. I also like very much the music in the child Willy Chireno, Poveda, the Estefans. If one day if we could have a second national anthem, I think it will have to be performed by Celia Cruz. Well, we have it in one of our radio stations. I listen to her every morning. Let's talk a bit about your stay here. And you have already talked about exile, but also what you have seen when you drive by on the streets. How do you see it, the way you thought it could be? Right now, I am seeing that there are many stereotypes, many lies. Not that I believe them. You always have the doubt until you can see for yourself. So I had been told that, for example, that in the city of Miami, a lot of people tell me it's a city that has no cultural life. All those cliches, all those ill-based and sometimes ill-intentioned stereotypes. So I can see that it's a live, dynamic city that never sleeps from what I see, with much intellectual appetite, as I can see, as shown by this Miami-Dade College. And I also see a city with a lot of solidarity. In Cuba, we have lost solidarity because we have always distrust one from the other. We always think that the neighbor, your brother, can belong to state security, can be a snitch. Here I see that purity, that spontaneity of Cubans, that Cubans have because of an idiosyncrasy to tell you what they think in a loud voice. That has impressed me. Talking loud, yes, we talk loud. And when you see that long hair and that hippie dress, people, do you have a promise to the Virgin? You have a promise to, no, I have a promise to freedom. So I'm free with my hair as well. It is as free as I am. It is as free as I am. I love it. It's free as I am. I also talk about something that happened yesterday. I have followed you for many years on your blog and Twitter. And the Twitter was hot, your exchanges with several of your followers. And there was a post that is worth mentioning. I remember Gandhi's phrase, first they ignore you, then they laugh you off, and then they attack you. And then you win. So I am in the phase at which I am being attacked. And the answer came. It's not an attack. It's a way to wake you up how false the falsities of cruel capitalism with which you have become infatuated. And you told her, I don't need anyone to wake me up. I live under state capitalism without a right to protest. So my question is, you don't have now a fear when you go back because you have always written very strongly and very clearly. But every day that happens, you are becoming stronger and clearer. But freedom is contagious. You always want more. Fear. Fear gets to a point that they cannot give you more fear. I said this morning that fear is like taking a glass of water, and you fill it up and you try to put more water. You can't. When you get to a point with so much fear, then they cannot make you any more afraid. So yes, that's it. What can they do to me? They can do very ugly things. Yes, I know what they can do. I have seen it. I have seen the face behind the mask, and it's horrible. But I think that, first of all, there are many ways to react to fear. There are people who are paralyzed, they go under the bed. Since I was small, when I was afraid, I would run towards it. I like to face my fears, to understand why they had made me afraid. So they will not forgive me because I shut up now. So I continue this way to protect me and my people. So I'll continue the same way. So what the most serious thing that I have? I have it in mind with my first step. When you challenge the power, who doesn't want to challenge it, like a despotic father that doesn't want his children to rebel. I'm ready for everything. I'm prepared for everything. What I fear the most is for my family. But as for me personally, what can happen? In the end, I live in peace. I live my life with the freedom I wanted. So when you talk about, to a certain extent, that your words protect you, that publicity protects you, you're a woman who have so many children who grew up in Cuba that did not live on that generation with a church. What's your opinion about ethics? Well, I grew up under the most ferocious atheism. My grandmother would hide her crucifix under her clothing and would pray in a low voice. All of that we lived through in the 70s and 80s. Then I've become an agnostic with metaphysical doubts, but I believe in the virgin of El Cobre. Yes, I went to the Ermita and to El Malecón. It was very impacting because it seemed to me I was in Havana in many ways. So I took a peep and I said, so near yet so far. And in Cuba, the ladies in white that you know, so many of them who walk towards the church in Havana, sometimes you have participated with them, some not. Do you have an idea of what religion is in Cuba? The church, not only the Catholic Church, but also the Protestant churches, if this type of reflection is growing the people. Yes, there is a return to faith in many ways. People need to believe in something. So church, not only the Catholic Church, but also the Protestant churches, has given shelter, solidarity to many people who have been hurt. So people have taken refuge again in the church. So sometimes when a tradition is interrupted, when something that was part of your identity, to take it up again is difficult. It's like you are stumbling. But the Cuban people is deeply believing. It's not, they don't practice. They're a bit undisciplined when it comes to practice. Yes, that has been a constant in Cuban history. So a year has gone by since Pope Benedict went to Cuba. So that's why I was asking whether you saw any changes. There was a strong criticism within the Cuban church and here that maybe the Cuban church was too soft, that maybe the cardinal was not strong enough to deal with the Cuban government. Well, as I was told you, I'm an agnostic with metaphysical doubts. I don't put my hopes or the changes of what happens in the Catholic hierarchy or what happens in the Vatican. I think it depends on what we as citizens can do. It's true that the visit by the Pope was very controversial, and I will answer in Twitter with 140 characters. I remember a Twitter I sent while Benedict XVI was in Cuba. There were a lot of people arrested, telephones cut off, a lot of activists detained. I was detained in my house. The public squares are full. Also are, and so are the dungeons. So what I left with is one final question. A journalist never has a final question. Oh, I'll be after you the whole day long. Up to a certain point, you already touched on it at the beginning, but with your own words, what did you say that the Cuban people in Miami can take away from your visit here and your travel throughout the world in 80 days? I think there would be too much to aspire, to dream. If I can transmit the idea that in Cuba, there are people who are very, very concerned for the future of Cuba. They are very responsible, patriotic, they have not believed the official version of history, who are waking up, as I said in my text. If I could share that sense of motion, not because of the slow reforms made by the government. Cuban is changing at the level of Cubans. That gives me hope. Thank you, Yoani. Thank you. Is this history in the making or not? Do you understand us a bit better now?